Atlanta, and in 2016 returned to All Saints Atlanta, where she served as interim rector and the first woman to lead the 3,000-member parish. In the words of Walter Brueggemann, Martha Sterne's daily world consists in 1,000 human dramas. She notices each of them and sees in them a rich variety, occasions of grace. Likewise, longtime friend and sister in ministry, Barbara Brown Taylor says, "There is no other voice in the world like Martha Sterne's. In her wise, funny, and utterly candid hands, nothing remains trivial." And so please join me in extending a warm St. Bart's welcome to Martha Sterne. Martha, welcome, and thanks so much for being with us this morning. I hope you'll join us at 11, where she will preach the sermon at our choral Eucharist. Martha, tell us about yourself. How did you wind up here in ministry? Tell us about your journey.
I grew up in Jackson, Mississippi. You may hear a touch of a southern accent, and went to a small Presbyterian church there. What I grew up with was what Carlyle Marney calls a most tragic man in a most tragic house. If you are a minister of the gospel in Mississippi in the 60s. My minister growing up, Dr. J. Moody McDill, just saw the gospel, spoke it. I mean, this is in the day when there were people standing at the front doors of churches and saying, "I'm sorry, you can't come in." You look too hippie. You look like you're one of those bus people that rides across the South, Freedom Riders, or you're too dark for us. So I watched his heart break. Our congregation supported him, but it was a hard road. I left there, went to Vanderbilt, met my husband, Carol, and just left behind the church, like so many of perhaps your own journey, or your children or your grandchildren. Just, you wander off. And then one day, we're Atlantans, one day, a friend of ours, his aunt died, Aunt Elizabeth. And they buried her from an Episcopal church. And this is the first time I kind of hung out with you all. And I go in there, and Aunt Elizabeth is, God love you, Aunt Elizabeth, but she was just this very mousy, forgive me, boring old lady. But we were there in support of our friend, and I watched that liturgy treat her, respect her, lift up her dignity. They weren't doing any kind of fancy, eulogy thing. And I thought, my God, it's true. The dignity of every human being. So that's how I got started, and then worked, as I mentioned in my sermon, in public housing in Atlanta, and just wandered on into the Episcopal. We're a real small crowd, real tight crowd. Matter of fact, your rector, Tom Bowers, came from Atlanta. We taught him everything he knows. He's alive. And eventually, Bill Tully, I think he hung out here for a while, didn't he? Well, he wrecked my life, so let me talk about that a second. I was at All Saints Atlanta having a good time, been there for 10 years. Great Midtown Parish. We ended up stealing Zack before y'all stole him. And Bill Tully wrecked my life because he was the head of the search committee at St. John the Divine. And he got him to call my boss, Harry Pritchett from All Saints, to come up here and be the dean at St. John the Divine, which broke up our little nest. I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but when a new boss comes in, it's kind of hard for the people to change gears. And I thought, I'm going to try something new. And that's when you and I ran into each other.
In Maryville, Tennessee?
Maryville, Tennessee. Do y'all have a clue where Maryville is? Yay.
And it is Maryville, not Maryville, as one priest said, until you start calling the Mother of God Murray. I will call it Maryville. Yeah. But it's clear he wasn't from there.
Yeah. Merville, if you're real local.
And I still remember I was 8 years old, and the Sunday school got word that we had called Martha Sterne as our rector. And so we all made newspaper headline drawings about the new rector. And the front page of the St. Andrews News said, "It's a girl." It's a girl. And
I didn't know that. That's so cute.
And I like to say that Martha and I glowed up together. And I have the pictures to prove it.
Yeah.
This is a picture of Martha and I at my baptism when I was 12 years old, the night that my voice broke. Martha empowered me for ministry from the very beginning, and
I want to stop for a second with that picture. I want you to look at that picture a little bit, because you will see Zack, as usual, orderly, that beautiful voice, although that was a scary night. I mean, it was like Easter or something, and Zack's voice took off in a different direction. But look at me. That's my chasuble, and this is my signature. I have never worn vestments straight in my entire life. They always go like that.
I've never done much of anything straight.
Yeah, that's true. Good.
But what was it like? And she, not only, I was being baptized, but she, said, well, Zack should sing the solo for the psalm too. So poor guy, I was 12 years old and trying to cantor the psalm and be baptized and be an acolyte, I think. We do that to some of our youth here at St. Bart's. And it was the night that my voice changed and dropped about 3 octaves. So it was a traumatic baptismal experience.
And you could see the whole church, the whole community, just looking at Zack with these beautiful, I don't remember what you were singing. It was pretty. And then this moment, this crack, like that. And then you could hear the whole parish all over that church going, oh.
Wow. And I remember afterwards, you said to me, Zack, I've never been more proud of you.
Yeah.
And I still remember that. And I think that so much of your ministry, from my observation, has been finding grace even in the things that are breaking, the things that break our hearts, our voices breaking so that something new can emerge. And I think it's a timely word in this Lenten season, which always begins hearing the prophet proclaim, rend your hearts and not your garments, taking us to a deeper state of vulnerability. You were the first preacher I ever heard cuss. And what a gift that was to me.
I didn't know I did that. Do you remember what I was doing?
Well, I think you were praying for me and my mom when we were going through my family's divorce. And when you got the news, you looked at us and in the most real way said, well, damn it. And that was actually a gift to a 13-year-old, 14-year-old boy going through a rough time who needed his priest to be real with him. But what was that experience like for you, landing from the big city, Maryville, Tennessee, from Atlanta to Maryville, Tennessee, rural, small town? Why?
Why? My husband, Carol, is sitting right there, and Carol would call me in Atlanta. We both worked in Midtown. I don't know if any of y'all been like through our airport. It's a little, busy. Well, you can't believe how busy our traffic is. It's nightmarish. And Carol would call me and say, "Get me out of here. Get me out of here," even though he's from there. And we just started saying, what would it be like to live in a different way? In a world not so crazed and busy and jammed. We were both reading Wendell Berry. Has anybody read Wendell Berry? He's a wonderful poet, novelist, and agrarian prophet. And as he described, he places his world in Kentucky, in a small town in Kentucky, similar to the town that he grew up in and the farms around it. And we were just entranced with the idea of being in Wendell Berry's world. I mean, it's crazy, but that sort of happened. So I put my name out. I'm not sure exactly how you do that because it's been a while. But you put your name in the national church's hopper somehow. And a woman called me and said, "My name is Peggy Tollison. I'm from Maryville, Tennessee." And I said, "Oh." And I thought, wildly, where on God's green earth is Maryville, Tennessee? So I tried to stab at it. Do any of y'all know how Tennessee is? It's like this. I mean, it's long. Memphis on one end and Maryville on the other. And I did a stab, and I thought, well, maybe it's near Memphis. And so I said, "Oh, yeah, right outside of Memphis." And she said, "Let's try again." So anyway, she must have covered for me. And I went up there, and the Great Smoky Mountains National Park is our backyard. That's half of our county, Blount County. And I met, very similar experience to this morning. I met the people there like you do, in a search. You meet the search committee, you meet the vestry, all that. And I liked them. And I had the same experience. I mean, I'm not looking for a job. I had the same experience this morning. Y'all are lovely. You're so hospitable and welcoming. And anyway, it doesn't matter what size you are, that's at the heart of it. What you all call radical welcome. Who thought up those words? Well, I know Jesus did sometime, but that's part of your DNA is radical welcome. So I felt that this morning. I felt it in Maryville. When we got up there, Carol was still working in Atlanta and finishing up some things, so they got me to a house that we rented and just to find our way there. Me and my cat, our kids, I think they were off at school. No, they were going into their own lives. And my first night there, Carol's headed back to Atlanta. I hear the cat yowling. And I thought, okay, what could this be? There was a cow, literally, in our backyard. And the cat had never, I know about cows. I grew up in Mississippi, cows, horses, all that. But the cat had never seen anything like that. So that was our introduction. You know how your space has shaped you with this gorgeous, incredible architecture. And the way the light is in this place, sort of the mystery of the light over in the church and the stained glass and all that. Zack and I, our church in Maryville was exactly the opposite in its own beauty. Can you describe a little bit about what it was like?
Well, it was a former Quaker meeting house. There's a town next to Maryville called Friendsville, named after the Friends, the Quakers, and they built this austere, extremely, beyond Protestant box, basically. White walls, fogged glass, but white glass, no color at all in the building, except for the people. Really, the people brought the color.
Yeah.
When they Episcopalified it over the years, and they knocked out the back wall and built transepts to make it in the shape of the cross. But it was essentially a Friends Quaker meeting house.
Yeah, and the ceiling very high, and the acoustics are just wonderful there. Choirs come to practice in that space, and I said to Zack one day, "Why did the Friends care about acoustics? They don't even talk." And we don't know, except they love the beauty of it. And anyway, we inherited. They built it in 1871 to come down and help create some educational opportunities for both people of color and also for people in the hills and the hollers, of which there were quite a few. And that was their world until the 20s. Well, St. Bart's is about that same. You all have moved a couple of times, right? Well, anyway, back in the 19th century, they did that, and that's what you all were doing too. Creating spaces for spirits to expand.
So, Martha, reflect a bit on what it's like to be, whether intentional or not, really a pioneer among the women clergy, both in Atlanta and in Tennessee. What have been the challenges, surprises, joys, and blessings along the way?
My first job was at All Saints Atlanta, and I was not the first female priest there. Some of you will have read or heard Barbara Brown Taylor, and she had been there 3 or 4 years. And your St. Bart's got in her life too. Who was it? Tom Bowers. Hired her first job. I think she was like a youth director or something at his church, St. Luke's, Atlanta. And so that kind of pulled her into the Episcopal Church. She goes over, and she's a wonderful writer and preacher. Goes over to All Saints, and she's been there 3 or 4 years by the time I get there. And the first thing I heard our rector say is, "Guess what they're saying to me?" And we said, "What?" And he said, "You had to go get 2 of them?" So, I mean, we were having 2 was real odd, and it was pretty odd to have 1. Barbara is my BFF. We've been together 30 plus years, but we started off kind of rocky. She is the most precise person on the face of the earth, and her handwriting is just, these little, it could be a typewriter, only pretty. And I don't know if you've noticed, but that's not my way. So we had to find our way together and get used to each other, and we did. So I wasn't exactly a frontiersman there. This is the kind of thing it does to. I don't know what I did. Disconnect myself. Early on, I did a Eucharist at a nursing home, senior residence, but this one was really a nursing home. And I mean, I hadn't done this 3 times. So I'm sitting there going, okay, how we do this? Somebody tell me what I'm doing wrong. Oh, good. That makes me feel better. Notice how women automatically assume it's our fault. I mean, maybe nobody else does, but I do. So I'm going around the circle of these people in wheelchairs and so forth, and I offer communion to a woman, bright blue eyes, and she takes my hand and brings it to her lips, and I say, the body of Christ. And she bites the fool out of me. So, I mean, I had teeth marks. Yeah. So I thought, well, I guess she's against female ordination or something. And I get back and Barbara says, well, what about if you said to her, take and eat the body of Christ? I thought, okay, well, I'll look at it that way then. I was the outreach person, and we had a men's winter shelter that I hated. I just hated it from the get-go because it would start, and then people would line up. Nobody knew each other's names. Just I knew we could do more, and it would start in November and end in February. And what is it? What we've got to offer is radical welcome. Well, you can't just do that 4 months out of the year with people when they just get a number from you. And you say, hey, okay, it's time for 52. So I kind of politicked around about that, and we ended up going full year round and having a drug therapeutic rehab community that lives at All Saints, 14, 15 men, smaller but realer, and it has gone now for 30 years. I would say that's the thing that I'm most grateful for in my ministry, because I see folks around town whose lives have been changed and whose families are reunited, and several of these guys work at All Saints. It also broke down the barrier between those pitiful, poor drug addicts over there and us smart, got it all together church people over here. Because once you've got a group that is admitting that they're addicts living on your block, it changes you. Because let me tell you something, there's not a person in this room who doesn't love somebody who's addicted. Not a person. So that was a game changer for us. I started something that didn't go as well, but is now unbelievable, and that was a refugee ministry. We started that, and it's just slow going to figure out how to do that. That's a whole different ball of wax. But now we're one of the biggies in the Southeast. We've got a ton of folks that come to us when people aren't fooling with the refugee laws like they did for a little while ago. I will not speak more about that. And we've got people. We've got a kid that came to us early on that now is one of the head cardiac surgeons at Emory Hospital. I mean, this kid knew nothing, and that's something I'm really proud of. And again, that's where you connect with each other. It's not just a check you write. People tutoring, people having swimming parties every summer for the kids. People, we've got 60 or 70 tutors in the parish. I'm one of them, the worst one of them in the whole world. Have you tried math with a fifth grader? Don't.
Particularly on Zoom during the pandemic.
Oh yeah, and we've had to do it on Zoom.
Martha, that's resonant with some conversations we're having here at St. Bart's with this newly formed Faith in Action team, thinking about all the needs, all the overwhelming needs that surround us here at St. Bart's.
Yeah.
And we know that we can't do it all, but we can do something and we can do more. The question is for us, and we're going to have a season of discernment around this, what do we want to go all in for? And then do that. How did you make the choice to do Refugee Ministries and go all in with that versus, mass incarceration or hunger or something else?
It helps not to be the rector. Because the rector has got this whole thing going on. But when you're a staff person, it really helps to have a small community of people do discernment and then get people together that can shape and grow and experiment, maybe in 2 or 3 different directions. I don't know what your discernment will be, but the thing I know is Jesus was not kidding around when he got 10 or 12 people together and kept growing stuff with them. And it's not 10 or 12, it's this group over here and that group over here. I don't know what y'all will do. You're surrounded by the biggest city. And what do you think? What do y'all think about? You come to this place, you care about this place. What caught my attention was a priest saying early on, this was at St. Anne's, would anybody notice if we were gone? If they just picked us up and moved us? Well, they'd notice this big building being gone. That's for true. And they'd be really very sad about that. But what about the incarnations in it? What about the connections moving out from it? That reshaped me.
And Martha, not to give too much of a sermon spoiler, but we're thinking this morning about Nicodemus and being born again, born from above, born of the Spirit. And you almost died a few years ago and perhaps had an experience of being born again in a way.
Did.
What was that journey like for you?
That was really a born-again journey that I first heard about when I was in Maryville, when a woman named Marmee Mears, do you remember her? She would come to the 8 o'clock, so y'all were in a different crowd, and if a baby came and sat next to her, she'd pick up her pocketbook and move. So what we ended up doing is the worst babies in the parish, their parents just got a kick out of it, and they'd go sit next to Marmee. She had multiple myeloma. Anybody know what that is? It's a blood disease. Bone marrow ain't good. And she was my friend and my parishioner, and she had the worst death except for AIDS deaths that I've known. She wouldn't say it was the worst death. She was tough as nails, but it was in my eyes. So, I'm tooling around 4 years ago, right before the pandemic hit all of us, and I'm doing yoga in the yoga class, and I feel something hurt, give, and I thought, well, strain my little self. And after 5 or 6 weeks and some blood work, et cetera, I've got multiple myeloma. And when Marmee was going through it, that killed you quick. So I thought that was what was going on, but thank God for medicine, Sloan Kettering, Emory, others. They've got some new tricks up their sleeve. And you do have a born-again experience because they take all of your blood, every bit of it, run it through a machine while you're sitting there, lying there, Oh, I got to stop for a second and tell you a bad thing that happened. The hospital was great. I loved all those people. They were wonderful. But Carol and I, my very adorable husband and I, are going to the place where they take your blood out. And I look like something the cat drugged in, and 100,000-year-old something the cat drug in. And Carol is his usual adorable self. And the woman that's going to start all this says to me, "Oh, hi, Martha Sterne, glad to see you. And is this your son?" So that took a while. I finally trusted her to take my blood out. What they do is they take all your blood out, and they save the stem cell. I have no earthly idea how they do this, but they separate out the stem cells, and they kind of throw away a lot of your other blood. So you do die on one level, and you feel like you're dead for a couple of weeks. And then they put the stem cells back in after they've killed. Well, I guess they put the blood back in, but they kill all the cells in the blood because that'll kill the cancer cells. So the day that they put the stem cells back in you, this is at Emory, and I'm sure they do it other places too, they put balloons on your door and they say, "Happy birthday." So you are born again. I want to say something about women in medicine. My oncologist, the sort of only blood marrow disease person at Emory, my other doc, both of them looked to be about 15 years old. And both of them were women, and they saved my life. And then you go, and when you're as sick as I was, you can't do anything. Carol would come and sit, but I mean, he can't care for me. And the women that surround, has anybody sort of had that kind of experience in a hospital where the women around you care for you so tenderly? And it moved me to my toes. And when I came home, we still had to have some people around me in the middle of the night to come and care for you in the most intimate ways. So I didn't care about being alive or dead for several months. I mean, I thought I'd be scared to death to die, especially after I had known a woman who had died so painfully of this disease. I didn't care. It was just too tough. But gradually, life started kind of flowing through my veins again. And one of those docs, we named our dog. I got a pandemic and multiple myeloma puppy, and we named her after my oncologist, Samantha Shams. God love you. And the dog's name is Sammy. But she said, "You can go out. Your blood looks good. You're doing well. You can go out. Go have lunch somewhere. Do something." And about 5 days later, she called and said, "Guess what? This COVID thing is real. Go back in your cave." And we did. We were closed up for 4 years. Zack was my priest. Isn't that great? We rolled around. He had come to All Saints after I'd been trying to get him there for 2 or 3 years, and your bishop in Tennessee wouldn't let loose of you. Finally I didn't get you there, somebody else got you there, and he was my priest. He and Michael Watterson, his husband, would come over and just sort of be with us. Dearest friends in the world for Carol and me. It all connects. It does. So you baptized me into new health. I love you, Zack.
Amen. Thank you, Martha. And you've saved my life in more ways than you can know. So, being a part of Martha's church from the time I was 8 to 18 probably did save my life.
Yeah.
I had a very different experience growing up as a gay kid in a Christian church than 100% of my gay peers growing up in churches in East Tennessee. I always knew that St. Andrew's was a safe space, a brave space, a place where all were welcome. And I had a priest who I could call on a first name basis.
Yeah.
Just Martha.
Just Martha.
And what a gift that was.
And you had an organist who loved you.
Yes.
Now, I know y'all have never experienced this, but sometimes organists and rectors don't get along that well. So Sandy had been there for 30 years, and she was a great musician, great choir director, great organist. But she and I couldn't quite, I think she would have rather had someone with a different body type than me, like male. But Zack brought us together because we both loved him, and we loved the people in that choir surrounded you for one thing, and they loved your voice. Let's face it, that was a big attraction. but they also loved you, so they're sort of bringing you up, and you're bringing kids into a new way of being at All Saints. At St. Andrew's. He is the most adorable mother in the world. So if she comes up to visit, seek her out.
And she loves St. Bart's as well. Well, we're coming towards the end of our time, so we do want to open the floor for any questions. Parishioner Diana Sarbu is hanging around. She can take your paper cards. And you can also email questions to Peter Thompson. That's pthompson@stbarts.org. Or drop a comment on YouTube or Facebook, and the questions will get to us. Martha, what have you not talked about yet that you want to talk about? You're such a brilliant and gifted storyteller. I'll let you take the lead.
I still am attached to Mississippi, and anything I've learned about the power of story comes from growing up in a family and in a state of people who talk constantly and who tell stories. My great-grandmother wrote children's stories. We still have them. Lived out in the country, taught the kids that were, around. My aunt's a wonderful novelist, Ellen Douglas. My cousin Brooks Haxton is a wonderful poet. Teaches up at Syracuse too. So you get around people that talk all the time and that thinks words matter. That's the thing that worries me about our time now. We're in a state of being in this country where we forget words matter. They do. Whether you're authentically saying what you believe. And I love that about the Episcopal Church. We tell stories, and we know the beauty of the liturgy is based in language. In the beginning was the what? Yeah. So I'm lucky enough to have been around a lot of people that are word folks.
As I reflect on your ministry, Martha, one of the things I'm so grateful for is your ability to be so sure and confident in who you are and your identity in a way that allows other people to be who they are. We don't all have to be the same. And I have vivid memories as a teenager watching you roll up in your RAV4 during the 2000 election cycle with your candidate sticker on the car, and you didn't apologize for it, nor did you expect that all the parishioners agree with you. But you weren't afraid to kind of have an opinion, have a stance, and to be Martha in that.
Yeah.
And I think that that must have been key in serving alongside your BFF, Barbara Brown Taylor.
Yeah.
As a priest, it gives me a lot of hope for doing ministry with my best friend, Peter
Yeah.
Thompson, here
Yeah.
at St. Bart's, and to be on a whole clergy team full of superstars, just as you and Barbara are both superstars in your own right, but you're not the same. And you've been able to create space for one another to be fully Barbara and fully Martha, and to thrive in love. And surely there are the annoyances from time to time. But you made it work.
Yeah. I love that y'all were friends, are friends, and are here together. That was just huge for me. Matter of fact, when Barbara decided to she wanted to be in a small town. I kind of copied her. She wanted to be in a little town up in the mountains. So she left All Saints. And I remember being outside a restaurant at Lenox Square in Atlanta, and just starting to boo-hoo and bawl and saying, "You can't leave me with Harry," who was my boss.
All right, we have one question from our online audience. What is the best advice you can give us for peace in our lives?
Oh my. Breathe. Be kind. Be kind. Be kind.
I think that's as good as any place to stop. Thank you, Martha. Thank you, Zack.
Thanks, everyone.
That's fine.
That was a really tender, beautiful conversation. Thanks to you both. Thanks to you all for being here. We continue
What do I
our
do
Women's
with
Voices
this?
in the Church series next week with
Here,
the Reverend
give me
Dr.
a hug.
Ebony Marshall Turman. She's a professor at Yale Divinity School of Theology and African American Studies. So look forward to seeing you then, and looking forward to seeing you to hear Martha preach at 11 o'clock.
That was great. I liked it.
Thank
Yeah.
you. So much. We could have gone on for